Welcome to the Significance Podcast. I'm Dan Raviv. I'm the co-author of a book called The Quest for Significance. My co-author is Professor Arie Kruglanski, who is a distinguished university professor at the University of Maryland. And we have a guest in this episode of the Significance Podcast, Professor June Tangney of George Mason University. We'll talk about your work, your book, and how it relates to significance. June Tangney, thanks so much for joining us.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Arie Kruglanski, for years, frankly, you've been writing about significance as a human need. And so the result, I'm so lucky you invited me in. Together, we've written a book, The Quest for Significance, Harnessing the Need That Makes the World Go Round. So for any listeners and viewers who aren't familiar with all that, how about a brief definition of what our quest was in the quest for significance?
Well, the quest for significance is a fundamental social motivation. It's the desire that every human being has to feel respected, to feel worthy, to feel that they matter, that they are a good person. And this need is present in our lives from the cradle to the grave. Uh, the infant vies for attention, and we all want to die with dignity. So it accompanies our throughout our life journey, and not only individually that it affects us, but also it propels social movement for people who feel disaffected, disrespected, marginalized. It fuels revolutions, it fuels wars. So it's a motivation that virtually not only pulls all strands of psychology together, but it affects the shaping of world history. And that's why we think that it's such an important motivation. And the work of Professor June Tangney, the distinguished university professor at George Mason University, is so relevant because she talks about what happens when you lack significance and experience shame and guilt. But it's better that I let her explain what these things all mean and how important they are.
I'm certainly happy to mention that is the book title, Shame and Guilt, the book that is by Professor June Tangney. So, from what you've been hearing, June, how does your work on shame and guilt, and I know a lot of that work has involved incarcerated individuals, Americans in prisons, how does that tie in to the quest for significance?
So, my co author, Rhonda Deering, and I, in Shame and Guilt, first spent some time trying to figure out if there's a difference between shame and guilt, because people often use these terms interchangeably. And it turns out they're quite different. When people feel guilt, they feel bad about something they've done, either failed or transgressed, hurt someone in some way. They're focused on a behavior. I did a bad thing. And that tends to push people in the direction of trying to repair, apologize, make things right, kind of future oriented. Shame is not so friendly. Shame is more about the self, not the behavior. I did a bad thing and I'm a bad person. I am flawed. I am unworthy. I am insignificant. I am unwanted. And so I think that in some ways, shame is the emotion of insignificance. I'm curious about what Arie thinks is the emotion of significance, having a sense of significance.
Ask our president.
Yes, yes. Well, and I think that significance is. I'm so glad you brought that up, Arie. That significance is much what makes us feel significant is tied very much to our individual values, and so people vary quite a bit in what their values are. I think our president values a different kind of sense of significance than you or I would. Arie, we're kind of far along. We're both academics. We value contributing to knowledge. And so our yardstick is not so much how many people showed up on the mall for us, but how many people notice our work and cite it. A politician might value more power and the ability to make new laws or cut out parts of government. Teachers and mentors value and derive a sense of significance from supporting their junior people and seeing them succeed. So our values really do, I think, in some ways shape what makes us feel significant, and that varies a lot.
June, you can imagine that in our book, The Quest for Significance, we wrote not just about personal values, what's important to you as you quest for significance, but also, of course, the effect of the community around, the environment. What have you found, especially considering that you've done plenty of work, you're teaching, of course, to people who are free to be whatever they want to be. And you've also done research in prisons where people don't have all the freedom to choose. Will it be shame or guilt, or something even better than guilt? You said you can come back from guilt. So talk a little bit about the environment around, and that how that shapes our values. And therefore, if we want our lives to matter, we've got to be reacting to everything around us.
Yes. Well, let's take people who are incarcerated or who have been incarcerated, because it's a rough road, even after people have paid their dues, paid their time, and been released. It's a long road to come back to the larger community and to be accepted. I think the message that is given just by the whole structure of jails and prisons, our criminal justice system, is to dehumanize people who are incarcerated. They are not referred to by name ever. They're referred to either by number, you get a number, or even worse, hey, inmate. That word, we used to use that word actually in writing because it didn't necessarily assume that people who are incarcerated are offenders, because sometimes that, mistakes happen. But the inmate is actually really, really a painful word to people who have been incarcerated, because it feels so dehumanizing. It makes one feel unwanted and shamed and lacking in all significance. And then we have a culture here, at least in the United States, that largely believes once a criminal, always a criminal. And so people are saddled with this identity that is, the height of non-significance.
Arie, let me pull you into that, if I may, June, because I know, Arie, you've done also a lot of research in prisons, including some overseas, where there were members of terrorist groups, right, who were imprisoned, and spoke to you and your researchers about their motivations and why they fell into that. And you've also worked with extremists, such as neo-Nazis, who come back from that. So speak to us a little bit, if you would, about the ability to change, part of our quest for significance analysis also.
This is the problem of de-radicalization or rehabilitation that people talk about. And the issue of significance is cardinal in the process of de-radicalization. For example, in the work on de-radicalization that we have done in Sri Lanka with a very powerful terrorist group called the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, one of the most vicious terrorist groups in the history of terrorism. The effort to de-radicalize them was to treat them not as inmates, not as terrorists, not as detainees, but rather they called them beneficiaries. In other words, they treated them with respect to begin with, and they equipped them with the skills that would be necessary for them to regain their significance in society, vocational training, in various professions, creating contacts with them and members of the community that would accept them. So it was work not only on the radicalizing individuals, but on the community. That's exactly what June was talking about. The community also needs to change in order to allow for the radicalization process to be complete. Because if the community keeps rejecting them, they will have no recourse, but rather to go back to recidivize, to go back to where they are respected, to the gang, to the criminal culture where they can feel respected and valued. So I think this, process of changing them in order to fit, and also to changing the community so that they can be fitted, is cardinal to the process of rehabilitation or the radicalization.
I'm wondering, June, when you hear Arie speak about changing the community, what comes into your mind, whether we're talking about how the prison is run and what services, if the government runs the prison, often these days in America, it's a private company that got the contract, or does it make you think more about the country, the society, how the United States is treating
Well,
ex-prisoners?
I think both. I see really strong parallels between what Arie was speaking about in approaching this de-radicalization in a way that really parallels the ideas of restorative justice, which hasn't gotten a lot of traction, unfortunately, in criminal justice systems around the world. In some countries more than others, Australia. But there, the idea is to, really allow for the possibility that people can change, to support them in that, to open doors instead of closing doors for them to join conventional society, and to build a constructive life. And so there's not many options for that in our criminal justice system.
Would you define restorative justice a little bit more? Because I know you've written a lot about that phrase. And like you say, it's not picked up enough traction. So restorative justice, who would be running the program? What could it be?
This is done in a lot of different ways. The classic restorative justice intervention is actually having meetings between perpetrator and victim. And they each come and meet with important members of their communities and do some, reconciliation work where the perpetrator, the person who's, done the wrong, acknowledges that harm was done, takes responsibility, comes up with a plan to make things right. Everybody agrees, yes, this is fair. And now that person has a place to make things right and to rejoin a community instead of being rejected forever. So that's the idea. Unfortunately, I think the majority of people in our society don't believe that people can fundamentally change if they end up in prison. Prisoners are criminals, they're bad people. And one of the things I've learned is that, I don't know about your experience, Arie, you worked with a different population, but they're not that different. I mean, it's, any one of us could end up
on the wrong side of the law.
On the wrong side, or, and maybe not even fairly, Right. So that's the restorative justice part. I think that people have counted 103 different things that you can't do if you have a felony and you have paid your dues, that you're just blocked from. You cannot get Pell Grants. You cannot get other educational grants from the government if you have a felony on your record. A whole series of things that really are doors to a better life.
Well, I'm just supposing as what an experience it's been, co-author of a book with Professor Arie Kruglanski, who has written so much about the quest for significance. And I feel like I learned that even people who, well, ended up behind bars or in deep trouble, they lacked significance as children or in their local community. They found it only in the gang or doing illegal deeds or getting in trouble one way or the other. And then later they can be offered an alternative, which makes me wonder, Arya, come in please on this ability of people, this capability of people to change, which June says most Americans don't acknowledge that it's there.
We know that people can change. In psychology, that's the promise of positive psychology, that people can change. People can develop a growth mindset, the work of Carol Dweck. People can learn optimism, the work of Marty Seligman. People can de-radicalize. People are malleable. People to the extent that they are given the respect of society, they will do whatever it takes to change. So I think that's why this motivation is so important. And it's the changing the people, but changing the society. And of course, we focused here on prisons because of June's important work in this domain. But her work applies more to just prisons. It applies to people who are shamed because of the group they belong to, because of their religion, because of the color of their skin, for a variety of different, because of their ethnicity. So this issue of shame applies much more broadly, and the attempt to change society in order to remove the shame, remove the insignificance that is dealt to some groups in society. Changing society in that regard is the work of all great social movement, Black Lives Matter, the feminist movement, the LGBTQ movement. All these are meant to reduce the unwarranted shame that is bestowed on these groups by society. That's the work of increasing social justice, increasing equality, without which society doesn't function properly, and people are motivated toward radicalization and extremism.
I think that makes us think about the future versus the past. I think, June, you've also written about looking forward versus looking back, right? You might feel guilt, which again can be built upon in a useful way, or shame about things in the past, but it's different if people are more focused on the future and all the possibilities.
Yes. Well, I was thinking about the different ways that we think about significance and derive significance. So, and part of it is developmental. So, what makes a young child feel significant or insignificant is very different from what would make somebody your age feel significant or insignificant. And then Arie and I, kind of thing. So looking forward, I think especially as people age, they start thinking about what am I going to leave? What kinds of knowledge or extended family, a name on a building. People value different things. And then there's kind of significance in the here and now. Do I matter? Do I matter to this world now? And I read an article, I wish I was trying to dig it up this morning. I just ran across it going through Google News about a young woman who just decided she was going to not do any social media and not answer the phone, I guess they don't use the phone to answer, but whatever, and see if anybody noticed. Ooh. Now, it was a test of, really kind of a scary, I felt it in my stomach, test of, am I significant now to my world? And I worry about social media and, that as a yardstick for, do I matter? And then, I was thinking, well, okay, there's what's going to happen in the future. Will I leave a legacy? am I significant now? And then there's this thing about people looking back, you know, the interest in ancestry and tracing one's roots. Like, why? Well, it's another way, kind of feeling significant. I'm significant because of my ancestors who did this great thing, you know, and it's either by genes, that's a good thing. I come from that
all the way to the Mayflower.
right, or the Mayflower, or it could just be this feeling of, well, I'm basking in the glory of my ancestors. I can't go. I'm not going to go searching for new worlds, but
Arie, there's a direct parallel there because, you know, we wrote in the Quest for Significance about, well, among other things, trophy spouses, where you're basking in the reflected glory of someone else's accomplishments or beauty or wealth. And for some people, that is so important, right? Who's around them, where what are those people like, Arie? I don't think I ever had a chance to ask you. A person who is basking in the glory of the wife or husband or partner, that person doesn't have that much going for himself.
Well, I think we all bask in the glory of our partners. We do not fall in love with somebody who we do not respect, we do not admire. So a love relationship is a kind of mutual admiration society. You bestow significance by virtue of appreciating them, admiring them, and they do the same for you. It could be looks, it could be trophy wife, where you have nothing. But if the trophy wife does not love you in return, this is not a good relationship. This is not something that can be sustained. You know. So I think it has to be the mutuality of admiration is really essential to a viable love relationship.
mutual significance.
Exactly, mutual significance society.
Well, we're looking in our book, by the way, June, at win-win situations whenever they can emerge. We even dare, or is it fair to put it this way, to give some advice, right? Now that you understand that all humans have had a quest for significance, going back to the cave dwellers, right through Julius Caesar and the worst dictators and the best philanthropists, but everyone is on this quest for significance. We then try to give some advice, right? In your relationships, at your place of work, how do you get along with people? I think in short, Aria, you know, because I've tried the elevator pitch, in this case, it's the quick Zoom pitch, that if you recognize what the other people around you need, in their need for significance and mattering, it's probably not that hard to adjust your behavior and give it to them, make them feel great, and there's a much better chance that they will give you some of theirs.
That is beautiful. And it reminds me of some of the gratitude research recently. It turns out that people don't often express their gratitude to other people because for two reasons. They think the other person already knows, and they worry about embarrassing the other person. So they actually did a study where they asked people who were the people
Receivers.
who, receivers of gratitude. How did it feel? Well, first of all, I was surprised. I had no idea that they really felt that way, and it felt really good. Were you embarrassed? Not at all. And so, yes, I think validating people is so easy. It takes just a moment, and we have appreciation for each other that so often we don't
Express. Yes, yes.
You agree, Arya? That's a win-win situation that we were writing about in the latter part of our book.
Yes, because it's such an important motivation to, you know, to express your appreciation. Even if you disagree on some point, do it respectfully. Do it in a way that would not put in question your valuing of that person. You may disagree about an idea, and it's, you know, good to flesh it out and to examine it deeply, but not in the context of it reflecting disdain and disrespect and humiliating the other person, because then it quickly escalates into a shouting match in which nobody hears the other person, So I think, it's essential. This mutual respect is essential in international relations, in couplehood, in friendship relations. It's just such an important motivation that understanding the gratitude, the appreciation, the importance of it makes everything smoother, better.
June, I imagine you've been at these crossroads from time to time, that you're teaching at George Mason University, you're lecturing at all the places you lecture, and frankly, you hear a question that someone insensitive would say, what a stupid question. The crossroads is, how do you deal with that? How do you make the person with the question feel? I imagine you have faced that, June.
Yes, and I think the first thing is to gently remind, there's really no such thing as a stupid question. And I'm glad you brought this up. I'm glad this came up. It sounds like we have different ideas about that. And sort of to make room for, there is room for different ideas. And it's not like one's a jerk and the other one's not, right? I also think it's helpful to tell people, you've really gotten me thinking about this. I don't necessarily agree, but I'm thinking about it in a different way. And that tells somebody, I take you seriously and you have significance, even though I disagree with you.
Well, when it comes to that, Arie, could you just pick up the point, and we only have a couple of minutes left, so maybe it's the last thing that comes to my mind, looking forward, looking back, or living in the moment in your quest for significance. Arie, people do all of it, looking back and forward, but all of us live in the present.
Well, yeah, we want significance in the present. We will take significance wherever we can find it. If it's our ancestors, we'll take it. If it's current likes on the Facebook, we'll take it as well. If it's something that we can do in the future to become more significant through learning, through our business successes, through our initiatives, through our political victories, we'll work very hard to get it. But the important thing is to understand it and accept it and accommodate people in their quest for significance. And that would make for a more peaceful world, more constructive society, more accepting, more tolerant human interactions. So I think that's the importance of it. Whether it's prisoners or terrorists or your spouse or your students, it's important to give them the feeling that they matter.
June, you are our guest, so please, you get the final word. Maybe pull together some of the threads we've been discussing for the past half hour.
I think it's really important for us all to think about significance and how to spread it around more. You have both. I want to congratulate you both on finishing the book, and I can't wait to read it. Thinking about significance over the last week has been fascinating to me. I realize how much it's been neglected in the field, and I'm so glad that you are doing this.
Wow, thank you so much.
I think it'll make it a better world.
Thank you. Professor June Tangney, your book is Shame and Guilt. You teach at George Mason University and going on to greater things, I know, in the future. So much for us to research, to write about. I mean, the world is really interesting, especially the people in it. Arie Kruglanski, my partner, my senior partner in our book, The Quest for Significance, Harnessing the Need That Makes the World Go Round. Professor, thanks very much. And that's it for this episode of the Significance Podcast.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, June.
Thank you so much.